what I want to talk about is vibe coding and kind of the lessons that I've learned going through this process. Hopefully, you'll learn from some of my mistakes and maybe some of my learnings as well. So, as I got into this very first, this was kind of the face that I made every time I heard someone talking about vibe coding and writing with AI. And it's believable, right? As you look at all the hype that's out there and all the things that are happening, AI is going to completely replace us. Our jobs are all going away. It's chaos, and we're ruined in our careers. As I see all of that hype and I saw all the things that people were saying, it just felt like this big hype machine. And so I really felt the same way as that guy a moment ago. I was like, this doesn't sound right at all. So I started digging in and I said, well, if I'm going to really evaluate this, I'm really understand it. I need to understand, what is vibe coding? What does it really mean? How do you do it? How do you accomplish all of this? And so I, like everybody, kind of just dove right in, right? I started with uh, ChatGPT, and that was fine. I was kind of asking it to write some functions for me, and then I would copy and paste that into my code. I would ask it to build simple things, like, hey, write this bit of code for me, instead of really looking at the bigger picture. So I started with ChatGPT, then I jumped into Cursor thinking, oh, this will be right in my IDE. This will be great. But what it felt to me more like was a hammer. It wasn't robots building things for me. And that's really kind of the way that I was thinking about it. So as I went through it, I continued and I thought, okay, well, let me try GitHub Copilot. I've heard a lot of good things about this. I'm a big GitHub user. Came from Microsoft. This probably will fit better into my flow. And I still felt like it wasn't accomplishing the kinds of things that I wanted it to do. And so I had a conversation with a friend of mine, uh, actually our MC, Jason Gilmore. And I said, hey, what are you doing? How are you building? Because I see you talking about things on LinkedIn and Twitter. How are you accomplishing all this? And so he said, oh, I'm using Claude. Claude is the thing for me. And this isn't meant to be a Claude commercial. I just want to kind of share the process that I've gone through. So I got him on a video call and I said, show me what you're doing, how you're doing it, because I feel like I'm close, but I'm just not there. And so this is where my head absolutely exploded, because as I was going through this process and saw what Jason was doing, it was different. He was writing requirements, he was building plans, and he showed me a document that looked a lot like this one. And I thought, well, my goodness, I haven't spent nearly that much time writing. I've been treating this like a chatbot. I'm just kind of asking for things and hoping it goes in the right direction. And I said, well, how did you spend hours and hours writing all this? He goes, no, not at all. I had Claude write the documents for me too. But we put a plan together and we got all this stuff rolling. And then I had it build based on all the decisions and planning that I had done. And so that really was kind of the eye opener for me. That's where the light bulb went off. And I said, oh my God, I have so many things that I could build. And so knowing all of that, I probably should have renamed this talk. It's only vibe coding if you don't have a plan, because when you do go into this with a plan and you do think about what it is you really want to accomplish, and you write the same kind of documentation you would give to real developers, you can be really, really successful with the things that you're writing. And so I put together a plan, right? Not this plan. Actually, it's this plan. My plan to build a website for card collectors. I am a sports card collector myself. I'll show a few here on the screen. But one of the things that I found was there aren't very many good tools for people that want to collect their collection, see statistics about it, manage their collection easily, find all the cards they're looking for. And so several years ago, I started building this application. I started with Excel, right? I had all the things that I needed, but I found relational data didn't work very well, and building reports off of Excel is kind of tedious and time consuming. And so I said, there's a better way. And so I was looking for a tool to really help me solve a lot of this problem. And this was way before we were really getting into the AI revolution that we have today. And so then I jumped to Airtable, and I had images and I had forms and I had a lot of things that I could do there. And I had this relational experience, but Airtable wasn't really good for me because I couldn't let other users try it. Like, it cost me $5 or $10 a month for every user I would add. And that didn't seem like it made a lot of sense. So I said, okay, let's go back to my roots. I'm a SQL Server guy. Let me see if I can just build out a real relational database. I spun something up on Azure and got it rolling. But I didn't want to spend the time to build the whole website from scratch. That just seemed like it was a huge project. And so I found another tool called Retool. And Retool could sit on top of my SQL Server, and I could build a bunch of forms and tables. And it was good for a while, until I continued to run into that same issue of, like, I can't have more than 5 or 10 users before it really starts costing me a lot of money. So after I'd gone through that entire process, I said, there's got to be a better way. I feel like as I'm going through all of this, I have the wrong tools for the job that I'm trying to accomplish. And that is when I had that conversation with Jason. And all of a sudden, it became like dopamine. And for any of you that have actually sat down and gone through this process of having an AI agent write code for you, like a full feature, it is addictive. I can't tell you the number of times in the last 6 months that I found myself up at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and I was just going to build one more feature at 8 o'clock. And all of a sudden it's midnight or 1 o'clock at night. I've lost complete track of time. And it's not just me, right? It's not just about the accomplishment. For me, it's really become more fun. The ability to write code and get the things that I want done in a very short amount of time is remarkable. A friend of mine wrote this the other day. AI is legit helping me find my love for building again, and I absolutely feel that way. It's you can see that, yeah, on this next slide. If I point an arrow to when Claude Code CLI launched, you can see that my GitHub activity has dramatically changed since. I've built dozens of things. In fact, I have a list of a few of them here. Collect Your Cards is just one of them, but I've built a bunch of kind of small boutique apps for all sorts of things that I'm working on. How do I share family gift lists with my family over the holidays? How do I manage a whole bunch of betting that happens at a March Madness event that I go to? How do I track my rounds of golf? How do I build a portfolio website? And with all the learnings that I've had, I should probably share this somewhere. I built a website called 31daysofvibecoding.com that is specifically there to share all the things that I've kind of learned and gone through as I've gone through this process. So a little bit about that. The 31 days of vibe coding looks like this, right? There's all sorts of information in here. I'm not here to sell this to all of you, but if you want to check it out, please do. There's lots of good prompting, lots of good information here, and you can check that out in your own time. All right. So the things that I wanted to share with you for the rest of this presentation are kind of the do's and don'ts that I've learned as I've gone through all of this process. So let's start with do's. I think those are more fun, and then we'll end with the don'ts because they're the things I want to make sure you leave with. So the first do, um, think about whatever your robot happens to be, your agent. They all have some sort of file that is a rules file. This was something that I only discovered because I saw somebody talking about it. A lot of these things with AI, the UI is not ideal, it's not intuitive, and you don't always know that these things could or would exist. And so I created a Claude MD file and I started adding rules to it, right? I said, hey, these are the things that I want you to do. This is the specs of my project. These are the things that we do when we write code for this project. These are the things that we do. And so here's an example of some of that. Never, it wrote this document, by the way. I kept telling it to do things and told it to update this document, but always search for existing code patterns. Never just attempt to start writing things without knowing what the code base is. Don't apply band-aid fixes. Always let's talk about the real architectural issues. There's lots of that kind of stuff in here. But my favorite was the bottom line on this screen. I can highlight it here for you. If you forget these principles, you will frustrate this user immensely. Read this section at the start of every session. It recognized that it was frustrating me because it was just breaking my rules consistently. Don't do this, don't do that. It would continue to do those things. One great example of this is that I have a dev database running on Docker. And I would say, hey, I want you to go modify the schema there and then document that for me so I can change my production version. And it would immediately try to log into the database. And it was just guessing what the password was. It guessed the password was password 123 exclamation point. Well, that wasn't the password. And it would every single time I asked it to do anything with the dev database, that's what it would try first. And so eventually I had to go through and change my rules so that I also had information about what the password was, right? I actually ended up changing the password to its recommendation so that I would stop running into those errors every single time and we can move a little faster. But I incorporate all sorts of rules. Anything you see here, you'll be like, oh my gosh, you showed a password. This is all stuff that's just on my local dev machine, so you're welcome to it. I would never use this stuff in production. But this is the way that we get a lot of this stuff communicated directly to. I refer to it as our robot, but ultimately, this is something that I didn't realize existed when I first got started, and was surprised how easy it made a lot of the system and how easy it made to give it instructions about what to build and how to build it and how to approach problem solving. So beyond that, let's talk about my next big discovery, and that was managing UI. So as Jason mentioned, I started my career early in advertising agencies, lots of big brands, and the visuals, the UI that every website came with was of vital importance. It was something that I really spent a lot of time thinking about the best ways to build UIs for users. And what I found pretty quickly is, as I was building stuff for my own sites using AI, is that it was not following any of the guidelines that I thought were important. It didn't necessarily care about sizing. Every time I asked it to build a new page, it would kind of reinvent what the UI looked like. And I wasn't getting any consistency, which was really frustrating because you did it the first time, just do that again. So what I found was a really useful tool, and you'll see this in that 31-day series as well, is the idea of creating a design guide. And so I'm going to show you just a couple of screenshots from that. But what this is I sat down with my AI over like a day and a half, and I said, let's talk about all the components that we're really going to need on this site. In this example, I start with these team circles. So everywhere that I represent a team, I can't use team logos. I don't have that kind of licensing for the project that I'm building. So I needed some way to represent a team, and so I can use their colors. I can use abbreviations. I'm not getting in any trouble there, but in doing that, I needed to define what they should look like. Which color should be on the outside? Which color should be on the inside? By design, I've decided that the dark color goes on the inside, the lighter color goes on the outside. And then I just defined a bunch of different sizes. You can see that we have a 30, a 42, a 60, and on and on. But I also needed to be able to represent all the cards that were in my collection in a number of different ways. I needed a player card, I needed a series card, I needed something to represent a team and a year and a gallery, as well as the individual cards themselves. And so all of these were cards that I kind of defined as like these are things that we're going to show on the screen in a grid when we need to represent data. I also did this for all of the headers on my pages, right? If we're on Mike Trout's page, I wanted to be able to show a couple of card images. I wanted to show some statistics about him. I wanted to have a team header. I wanted to have a detail for what a set looks like. And all of these things, we sat down and kind of really defined what those look like. Also, at the very bottom in those small little colored blocks, I had what I called card tags. Cards can be a rookie card, they can be an autograph card, they can have a piece of a player's uniform in them. And all of those things are important to collectors. And so I started building these little colorful tags to represent what those things are that collectors really care about. And then we can just stick all those tags on a card, and it's very clear and obvious what those things are. Another big do for me beyond creating a design guide, although the best part about this design guide is that I can now say, "Hey, I want you to build a player detail header on this page." I don't have to give it the information about what that is. I don't have to give it any information about what that looks like. I can just say, "Please look at our style guide if you have any questions about what this should look like." And it produces this. It produces the thing that I wanted in the first place without having to redefine and restructure and tweak some CSS to make it really work. Another one for me was GitHub. I'm somebody that has used GitHub for decades, and it's really, really useful. And there's two things here for GitHub that are really important to me. The first one is it is your backup system. Every time you ask AI to change your code, it's just going to jump into the code base and it's going to change what it thinks needs to be changed. This might be one file, it might be 30 files, depending on what it's trying to accomplish with the feature you've asked for. So what I generally recommend is when you are done building something and you feel like you've tested it and it works, create a commit. You don't have to push it to up to GitHub. You don't have to make sure it goes through your CI/CD pipeline or any of that stuff, but at least make a commit so that you can roll things back. Then as you ask for your next requirement, you have a stopping point. You have a place you can roll back and say, "Hey, I fixed this," or "This thing's broken. Let's start over." And we can throw all of the changes out and go back to that last commit really easily without having to ask it, "Hey, what did you change?" Because I promise you, it won't remember either. There are lots and lots of files that will get touched, and you may or may not be able to change all of them back without having some sort of version control like this. So it seems obvious, but I will tell you, as you get into that vibe, as you get into like really feeling that dopamine rush of feature, 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 you're going to forget sometimes. And I can't recommend enough. Every time you feel like you're done with something, and you should work on one thing at a time, create those commits. Make sure that you're going through the process of being responsible so that if you need to roll something back, because AI will make mistakes, AI will change things that you didn't want to have changed. You have an easy way to do that. The other big one for me, though, is documentation. Uh, as I said early on, I started with all of this like a chatbot, and I found that pretty quickly it would forget things that I had asked for. I'd asked for 5 features and it would do 3. And so quickly I was like, oh, wait, we didn't do that thing. And I was trying to remember all the things that we had asked for. So what I've started doing now is I have a conversation with the chatbot. I say, hey, here's the things that I needed to do. Please document that in a GitHub issue. And it goes ahead and it writes a very detailed plan about what the feature is and what we're going to do, makes a GitHub issue that is now a permanent preserved record of that feature. And then we start. Now, anytime that I can say, hey, let's check issue 11 and tell me, did we finish all of that? Is that all completed? It will go and compare all the work it's done to what is actually in our feature and verify whether or not we've actually finished the task or not. This is huge, especially as you're working on this part time or in your evenings or whatever, and you only have small sessions that you can work on. It's an easy way for you to keep track of exactly everything you've done. So That leads into the next point, which is document all the things. The more documentation, the more information you can give it about what you want to accomplish, the better off it's going to be at solving that problem for you. And we see this with all sorts of things. I mentioned GitHub issues. I got a little ahead of myself here, but GitHub issues really are the solution for a lot of this, keeping your documentation. So the others are more conceptual, but I think they're really important to think about. Be iterative. It's very tempting to write long pages of instructions, but I find you're only going to get like 60, 80% of what you ask for when you ask for a big paragraph of stuff. I tend to be very focused in what I want to do. I have this specific feature. Let's go do this thing. It makes it easier for me to verify when it's done. And I find that the longer my instructions are, the more shortcuts that get taken as well. It's like when I talk to AI, it's like, okay, I have 5 minutes. What can I get done in 5 minutes? And it will stub things out, but it won't actually complete them because it didn't feel like it could get that done in the short amount of time it was giving itself. So be iterative. Make sure that you're thinking through your process as you go through all of this. The other big one for me, and this has a lot to do with what I'm focused on in my day job, which is a company I work for called Dynatrace, and that's observability. This is something that was always kind of tangential to what I was doing as a software developer. It was something that the DevOps team worried about, or some site reliability engineer, something like that. But the less that I'm reading my code, the more important observability becomes to me because now I can have it recognizing what's going on inside my system. I actually, just because of the logging that I was doing to Dynatrace, I was able to recognize that instead of making one database connection and pulling all the data that needed to happen in my card app, it was actually making 86 independent database connections for one user. And that was nonsense. Obviously, things were timing out and breaking, and I couldn't figure out why. And it wasn't until I really dug through some analysis of my logs that I found that, oh my gosh, we have all of these database connections. So if you're not already thinking about observability, I can't recommend it enough. Being able to have logs and traces in dashboards that give you information about exactly what's going on is absolutely key. So with that, let's move right into our don'ts because I know I have a couple minutes left. Um, don't give AI access to production. Now, to everybody that's watching this, including my mom and dad, I can't tell you enough how important this is. For most of you, you're saying they're thinking, why would I ever do that? But I can tell you that as you get into this process, you're going to say, man, this would be so much easier if it just could change the schema in my database. Or man, this would be so much easier if it could just see what files are sitting on my production server. And you'll be tempted. Don't do that. I just cannot emphasize it enough. Lots of people make this mistake. And I will tell you that in my experience, even with my development server, I twice, mind you, I have a database that holds millions of millions of sports cards, thousands and thousands of players and teams and series and sets and all sorts of stuff. Twice, I've asked it to make a change to something in my data schema. And it looked at my ORM and then it compared that to the schema in my dev database. And it said, oh, the dev database doesn't seem to be accurate. Let me blow it away and make it match the schema. And it completely deleted my database with millions of records and thousands of teams and all that. Now, I had backups and I was able to solve that, but I was blown away at how quickly it was able to say, oh, that's what you want? Boom, your database is gone. So be very careful. Another thing I can't recommend enough is don't skip documentation, right? Have the agent write a plan for you, have it explain to you what it's going to do. Claude has a great planning mode where it will specifically and explicitly not change anything. It will just document everything that it's learned, everything it knows about your code base, and what its architectural changes will be. And you can read that before it goes ahead and makes any changes to your systems. The last couple things I want to talk about is that tomorrow, the agent you're working with isn't going to remember anything about what it did or how it works or what you asked for. But your human colleagues, your teammates, they will thank you for the knowledge that they get from you. As you document things, as you put things together, make sure that you're doing this in a way that is useful to your colleagues as well. I think about all of the things that happen inside a code base. You can have your Claude file be shared across your team so that you're all kind of refining and building with the agent the same kind of way. But making sure that you're thinking about your teammates and the approaches that you're taking is even more important now. Another big one, we all talk about hallucinations, right? But don't assume correctness, and those typos are on purpose. I actually recommend bringing in a second agent. You could bring in Cursor, you could bring in Gemini. It doesn't really matter, but I like to bring in kind of an impartial third party to do other things for me. Have it act as a security agent or an architect, and ask it, where are my potential bottlenecks? Where are the security flaws that you see in this code base? It's amazing how quickly even your own agent that wrote all the code will quickly say, "Hey, here's an issue I see." Okay, so a couple last tips here. It's not done for you, it's done with you. And this is another important thing that I think gets away from folks is that you are writing the code. You are responsible for the output of what you're creating. When it gets supported in production, that's on you, what was created and how it was generated. So, in the same way that you would review a junior developer's code before you would push it to production, you should really be doing the same thing here because just because it's writing the code for you doesn't mean you're not responsible. And finally, don't ignore performance. I mentioned the database connection issues that I had, but there are lots and lots of things like that that go on inside your application that would be very hard to find.